One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been made possible by First Union National Bank, the St. Barnabas Healthcare System, Seton Hall University, the Shearing Plow Foundation, PSE&G, and by the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation, North Jersey affiliate, fulfilling the promise, making a difference. Additional funding has been provided by the CIT Group, Community Education Centers, Prismatic Development Corporation, the Mix Group of Companies, and Qualcare. And by these public-spirited corporations and organizations.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. For the next half hour, we'll be talking with an entrepreneur in the publishing business. His name is Stephen Hanks, and he is the person putting this publication together. It's called Dig. It is put out by the Archaeological Institute of America. They're a nonprofit organization. This is a magazine that's for kids. It's been recognized across the country as a magazine that really helps kids understand archaeology, what that is. And I've always been fascinated because it's like, what is it, more than rocks? Well, it is a lot more than that. And Stephen will be talking about that for the next half hour. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
From the shore to the cities to the mountains, New Jersey's environment is as diverse as the people who live here. The people of PSE&G work hard to make New Jersey's environment healthier for every living being, and a home for all of us to enjoy. We recognize our obligation to preserve the environment and improve it for our children. It's not a hard commitment to make. We like it here in New Jersey.
For nearly a century, we have measured our success by the businesses, the families, and the futures we've helped to grow. Because financing has always been a growing business at CIT.
You enter the financial world in search of a secure future. Instead, you find chaos and confusion. 9,000 companies to invest in.
Market mania!
10,000 mutual funds to choose from.
Hot stocks right here!
Bonds, T-bills, commodities, precious metals. With new and unfamiliar choices emerging every day. The possibilities are overwhelming. Fortunately, there is a beacon in this complex world. An experienced partner who, for half a century, has helped tens of thousands of individuals and families find comfort instead of confusion. Come to the mountain called First Union. Or if you prefer, the mountain will come to you.
Welcome back. I'm Steve Adubato, but more importantly, there's another Steve in the house. In fact, he's Stephen Hanks. He is the editor-in-chief of Dig. It is a publication that's put out twice a month? No, excuse me, every other month. Bi-monthly. I'm like, that's twice, like every other month.
Everybody has problems with that.
Exactly. A bi-monthly publication produced by?
The Archaeological Institute of America, which is a nonprofit organization, which also publishes Archaeology magazine, which has been around for 50 years.
Have you always been into archaeology?
You know, like a lot of adults that I've run into since I started doing the magazine, I had an interest in it and I was always fascinated by it, but I couldn't say that I knew much about it beyond, you know, being interested in ancient Egypt and how mummies are made and things like that. But because, you know, I've been an editor for 20 years and I've had some recent training doing publications for children. I worked at Scholastic for a year where I learned a lot about putting children's magazines together and how to speak to kids in magazines. This subject was accessible for me to do. Had it been about physics or biology, I probably couldn't pull it off. But there's something about archaeology because it covers so many other subjects. It's about art, it's about history, it's about geography, that I was able, the subject matter was more accessible, where it made it easier for me to edit stories about it.
You said you have experience talking to kids. How is putting a publication like Dig together and speaking to kids, communicating to kids effectively, how is it different from communicating adult to adult?
Well, one technical aspect that I discovered when I started editing for kids, that as opposed to editing for adults, you learn when you edit for adults that you try to make, wherever you can, you make things more succinct. If a writer gives you a story and the sentences are too long, you try to shorten them. In a lot of cases, when you edit for kids, you have to do the reverse to make a concept understandable. And you have to be careful with the number of words you have in a sentence, the number of sentences in a paragraph. The paragraphs have to be shorter. The language has to be as active as possible so that they're engaged by the language. But yet, what I'm trying to do with Dig, and this is sort of my goal with the magazine, aside from teaching archaeology, is to make kids understand what makes a good magazine. And a classic American, I've always been a big magazine fan since I was a teenager. And
why?
It was my next step. When I graduated from baseball cards, I started collecting magazines because I was a huge sports fan, and I just found it just really interesting to read about what was going on in sports in that format. I'd been a newspaper buff also, but magazines had a more in-depth writing. The pictures were much more impactful.
You like the glossy feel
the
of
glossy
the paper
stock,
itself?
yeah. And I thought, I love newspapers, but when I get older, if I want to stay in this business, I wouldn't mind, going out and covering athletes and writing 2,000-word in-depth features on them.
Which you did.
Which I did.
Well,
yeah.
let's jump around here a little bit. Before Dig, by the way, do we, Alana, what do we have? Do we have a website? We have a website and we have a telephone number for Dig, for people to order Dig. We'll put it up throughout the program to help Stephen's circulation, right?
That would be great.
Nonprofit stuff. But let's do this. Before you did Dig, you did a sports publication. What was it called?
Well, I worked on a lot of magazines early in my career, but in 1982, my wife Beatrice and I started a magazine called New York Sports, and it covered the Spectator sports teams in New York. When I was about 14 years old, there was a magazine in New York called Jock that came out. Not a lot of people remember it. It only had about 5 or 6 issues, but Howard Cosell wrote for it, all the big New York writers. And I remember when I got that magazine thinking, when I get older, I want to do that. I want to do a New York sports magazine. And even then I recognized that there were some things that I didn't like about Jock and that maybe I would do differently. And then I found myself in a situation, my wife and I were both between jobs, and we both had this passion and idea to start a magazine, and we said, let's do it now. And it was 1982. Sports in New York were getting bigger all the time, more teams, and we just decided to do it.
There's Phil Simms on the cover.
Yeah.
That's your magazine.
Phil Simms actually, that was the first cover Phil Simms was ever on, and I talked to him. I interviewed him for a story last year for Sport Magazine, and he remembered that cover, and that was 16 years ago.
Your wife was the publisher. You were.
I was the editor.
She was doing the business. You were doing the editorial.
That's right. She was making sure the magazine got on the newsstand and dealing with the printer and all the circulation, and I was getting the writers and conceptualizing the magazine.
How many editions?
We had 7 altogether between '83 and '85, and had to stop because we just didn't have enough money.
Let me ask you this. We'll come back to Dig, I promise. Sure. We'll keep promoting it, but I've been fascinated by magazines for a long time, and I've always toyed with the idea of trying to take what we do. I mean, just think about this, right? I'm going to actually pitch them right on the air. Not only pitch you, but play this out for you.
Yeah.
I've often thought that the kinds of conversations that we have on this program, in an edited form, with the right pictures, et cetera, could make for a fascinating publication. I mean, really eclectic people. There are, like George is a political magazine, and there are sports magazines and fashion magazines. Like today, I told you we tape 10 shows in a day.
Sure.
Right before you got here, we had Francine Tint, who's an artist.
Yeah.
We had motivational speaker come in. We had a African-American doctor, a woman who's a doctor who's came from a poor background, had 6 sisters, and all became professionals. And she wrote a book, won a Pulitzer nomination. My point is, I think it's a fascinating idea to put in print, but why doesn't that stuff happen? How hard is it to make a magazine work?
Well, I mean, it's first you have to have an idea that people really not only want but need. I mean, that's sort of a concept in the business that you have to cover those 2 spectrums. Some people want something, but they don't necessarily need it, and vice versa. Once you have that solved, then it's raising of the money. I mean, there's an incredible amount of money that has to be put in up front, like with any business, and so you have to have enough to get the idea out there, have people see it, have it create some kind of buzz, and then you're off to the races. It's interesting that you talk about an interview format, because over time, one of the most popular, if not the most popular feature in Playboy magazine was always the interview.
The Playboy interview.
The Playboy interview, classic.
The Jimmy Carter Playboy interview.
That's right. That's right. I lusted in my heart. Right.
We remember that.
Oh yeah.
But we don't even remember a lot of the pictures in Playboy. Mm-hmm. Well, but Greg behind the camera, you're laughing at that, right? You remember the Jimmy Carter interview. But are we as fascinated with conversation in print and on television as I think?
I think so. If it's tightly edited, I mean, it's really interesting. The Q&As that you see in magazines are not always what the conversation worked out to be when the people were having the conversation, and there is a lot of leeway that you have in editing interviews.
You mean to cut the quote-unquote boring stuff out?
You cut the boring stuff out, you tighten up the language, you make them sound a little bit more intelligent and articulate in print. But I think I think people are always engaged by Q&A kinds of stories because they cut to the chase in a lot of ways.
Dig, shifting gears. That was a whole different thing. I'm sorry for doing that.
No, that's okay.
I'm fascinated because not many people have had your experience, your passion, first of all, for magazines, and your experience starting them up and then getting into this situation. Now, the people at the Archaeological Institute of America, a nonprofit cultural and educational organization, were taking a look at the Mummy Mania edition,
That was the
right?
premier issue, yeah.
They're putting up the cash.
Right.
What's that like for you, not to have to go out and be involved in raising the money?
Oh, I mean, it's like a night and day. With I know it's a cliche, but I've been on so many entrepreneurial projects. Even after my own magazine, I worked on a lot of startups. I guess I was a glutton for punishment, where the people that were starting them were also trying to operate it on a shoestring, and it just never happens, no matter how good the idea may be. You just can't do it without a lot of money up front. The Institute is showing a lot of guts to do a new magazine because they're not, although they do publish archaeology, it's not a publishing company per se. The Institute's much broader and has other agenda. But to have that kind of backup and that kind of support so that we can get a voice and get an audience, it's great.
But where did the idea for Dig come from?
Well, the publisher, Phyllis Katz, and the circulation director, Fran Kane, who've been with Archaeology for a long time, felt that it was time, a couple of years ago, they believed it was time to launch a kids magazine, which, to be honest with you, as a magazine person, on the surface sounds like a wacky idea.
Right.
Because it's like, this is such a narrow, what they say in the business, vertical subject. How can you pull it off? And I guess that's where I came in. I mean, they brought me in and they said, okay, you got to make this work, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Stephen, as we're going out to the break, let's take a look at some of this. This is just one little section in the magazine. This is on art, kids' art, interpreting archaeology?
Archaeological scenes.
Archaeological scenes.
Yeah, we get a lot of dinosaurs, kids drawing pyramids and sphinxes and mummies, and it's amazing how many kids are really interested and fascinated by this subject.
It's amazing that you're saying that because, by the way, your daughter, who's out in the green room, was just with us. And I was telling you, your daughter is Jeannie, and my son is fascinated by archaeology as well, mummies. We just see this, another kid did a mummy. Zach Mayer, 12 years old, from Illinois, did a mummy. My son's fascinated with mummies. Where do our kids, like in school, is there interest in archaeology in general? being attended to?
There's a lot of interest in it, but the school curriculums are not specifically teaching archaeology per se. Usually in high primary schools and middle schools, archaeology is backdoored in through social studies. So, for instance, sixth graders learn about ancient Egypt or ancient Greece, but learning about the ins and outs of archaeology, the A, B's, and C's is not really being taught, so kids have to learn it on their own.
Not a priority.
No, not yet.
We are speaking with Stephen Hanks. He is the editor-in-chief of Dig, this publication. We'll continue to put up the website and a telephone number if you want more information on Dig. It's good stuff. You're having fun doing this, aren't you?
Oh, without a doubt.
When we come back from this break, we'll talk more about the publication and your fascination with magazines and anything else you want to talk about. Great. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It's coming, allergy season. And if you suffer like I do, you can stay indoors and miss all this. Or talk to your doctor about Claritin. Just one tablet brings 24 hours of non-drowsy relief from seasonal allergy symptoms.
Claritin has a low occurrence of side effects such as headache, drowsiness, fatigue, and dry mouth. All were similar to sugar pill.
You can't control allergy season, but with Claritin, you can help control what allergy season does to you.
This is a world only a few know well. A world of risk and uncertainty, where the roads can take you to success or prosperity, or sometimes to no place at all. This is the financial world. For decades, banks and investment firms of mountainous size have ruled the land. Yet high above the horizon, another mountain has risen. A mountain called First Union. With 16 million customers, the nation's 8th largest brokerage and 6th largest bank. For a new perspective of the financial world, come to the mountain called First Union. Or if you prefer, the mountain will come to you.
We know we had a long road ahead, but we were confident with the skill of the doctors and the nurses.
A lot of people prayed for me and believed in me.
There were a lot of joys and there were a lot of hard times along the way.
Tara's the joy of my life. She's the perfect daughter.
Her health is just outstanding. When she goes for checkups to her pediatrician, she's just amazed.
It's just like a miracle.
At the St. Barnabas Healthcare System, we believe in miracles.
Welcome back. We are speaking with Stephen Hanks. He is the editor-in-chief of Archaeology's Dig. You know, I was asking you, we were talking about your daughter, Jeannie, before we came out here. Actually, before we started the program. She'll be 8 this summer. How much, what influence does that have on you in writing this magazine, in editing this magazine?
I think it's going to become more and more fascinating. Hopefully the magazine will survive into when she reaches the upper end of our age range, which is 12, 13, 14. And I can watch her reaction to what we're doing in Dig and maybe change things accordingly. I mean, I already am doing focus groups on various, I go into classrooms, 4th, 5th, 6th grade classes, have the kids read the magazine and tell me, and basically critique it. And tell me what they like, what they don't like, whether the reading level is on target, what subjects they want to read more about. You know, I found out that the younger kids like the comic. The older kids, we have a 2-page comic that deals with archaeology history. The younger kids like it. The older kids could care less, you know, that kind of thing. But the older kids are more engaged by the games and the featured pieces.
Like a section like this, because I'm curious about how you break down the sections. The archaeology of myths and legends.
That was a lot of fun to do. It was a theme in the issue where we did feature pieces talking about the archaeology of Hercules, King Arthur, and Atlantis, and whether or not there is archaeology within those subjects and whether they actually existed.
So wait a minute, this is great because this is Greg, our camera guy. Get this shot. This is Hercules. In different situations. One is from a Disney movie, the other one is from the TV series, right?
Right.
So what do you do? What's the premise here?
that is a way, and we try to do this as much as possible, to use pop culture to show to teach archaeology to the kids. So this story was about how the ancient Greeks did all of this pottery and art about the Hercules myth, and that for thousands of years this has become a popular story, even to the time where Disney does movies about it. We did a story in the first issue about a woman who went to Russia and dug up bones of people who were purported to be warrior women.
Right.
And I sold it in the magazine as, did Xena really exist? And we had a story where there was a tiny picture of Lucy Lawless, and
who plays
Xena, and 10 pictures of the artifacts that the archaeologists found, showing that there might have been warrior women like that living in that place in the world.
You got to be having a ball doing this.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, I'm learning stuff every day doing this, and it's constantly fascinating, and you don't run out of subjects. You know, there are things that we haven't covered. We've done 8 issues, and I haven't even touched on subjects like the Maya, the Maya Indians. I mean, I haven't really done anything on them. The Vikings we're planning on doing in the next issue. We really haven't touched on the Vikings, and everybody's celebrating the 1000th anniversary of the Vikings discovering America, which a lot of people don't realize is probably the case. That Columbus didn't discover America, the Vikings did. So I think we can keep this going.
There's an endless supply here.
Oh yeah.
And let me ask you, from a business point of view, because the entity that puts up the cash is a nonprofit entity, does it restrict you from, saying, working a deal out with the folks at Nick Jr., Nickelodeon? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
not
I think about distribution
yeah.
networks. I think about how you reach kids, and my son, beyond loving public television, loves Nick Jr. What a great audience for you, no?
Well, yeah. Well, the audience that we really want to start cracking is the classroom audience, and getting as many copies as we can for teachers to buy for kids, the way Scholastic does it, and Weekly Reader. Our problem is frequency. We only come out 6 times a year, and also, since it's not a curriculum subject, it's not a current events magazine, it makes it a little tougher. But as you're putting it, some of these organizations are willing to talk to us about joint circulation ventures where we might be able to increase our exposure there.
Is there a possibility, could you take this concept, interesting, could you take this concept of Dig and turn it into a half-hour television format? Oh,
absolutely. And there have been some people that have approached us already about doing it, and the only problem we've run into, and you'll know this because you're in the business, is production companies want to try to keep costs down. So they say, okay, can we do a TV show where we don't have to go on location?
Wait a minute, let me get this straight. It's called Dig, it's about archaeology. Can you do it in the studio?
That's right, exactly. Let's sit for a half an hour like we're doing now and talk about ancient Egypt. Let's not look at the pyramids.
See, we're able to do this show, right? As I said, we do 10 shows in one day. Economies of scale kick in, right? You can't do it that way.
No way.
You have to be out there on location, digging, finding stuff, right?
Yeah, and
editing a lot.
At minimum, you might be able to use archive footage. You might be, but most of the footage that's shot has not been shot for a kid audience. So you might be able to splice in other shows like Discovery and things like that have done, but it would be tough. But we're working on it.
Got about a little less than a minute left. Real quick, Stephen Hanks. The internet, right? A lot of people argue, magazines, newspapers.
Yeah.
Their time has passed. You say what?
I love the internet, and I'm a big fan of it, and we even have a website, but number one, I would hate to see magazines killed, obviously, because I love print, but I don't really think it's going to happen, because there's something about a magazine can really be your friend. I mean, that's what I felt when I was a kid. It's tactile, you can hold it, you can read it, you can pick it up today, tomorrow, next month, in a year.
It stays on the coffee table and you pick it up anytime you want. Sorry for cutting you off. We'll keep talking off the air. Stephen Diggs, the editor-in-chief of Dig. Did I say Stephen Hanks? I'm sorry, Stephen.
Visit us on the World Wide Web at www.oneonone.org. The preceding program has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been made possible by First Union National Bank, the St. Barnabas Healthcare System, Seton Hall University, the Shearing Plow Foundation, PSE&G, and by the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation, North Jersey affiliate, fulfilling the promise, making a difference. Additional funding has been provided by the CIT Group, Community Education Centers, Prismatic Development Corporation, the Mix Group of Companies, and QualCare. Think about it. Hospitals know all about health care, and over 40,000 New Jersey hospital employees and their families trust QualCare for their own health care benefits. Just think about that and call us. One-on-One with Steve Adubato has also been made possible by these public-spirited corporations and organizations. Promotional support provided by Business News New Jersey. Read Steve Adubato's column every Monday in the Star Ledger's business section. The Star Ledger, the newspaper for New Jersey. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area, now offering limousine service in more than 300 cities around the United States.
It's the engine that powers New Jersey. It brings electricity to our neighborhoods, and the people of PSE&G make it work. For nearly 100 years, we've been working to supply energy for New Jersey's needs, providing power for businesses and lighting the way home. At the dawn of a new century, New Jersey's success will depend on the commitment of all of its citizens. The men and women of PSE&G are ready for that challenge.
It's coming, allergy season, and if you suffer like I do, you can stay indoors and miss all this, or talk to your doctor about Claritin. Just one tablet brings 24 hours of non-drowsy relief from seasonal allergy symptoms.
Claritin has a low occurrence of side effects such as headache, drowsiness, fatigue, and dry mouth. All were similar to sugar pill.
You can't control allergy season, but with Claritin, you can help control what allergy season does to you.
I woke up on Sunday morning and I had a pain in my chest. I went through all kinds of tests and they told me then that I had a heart attack. I'm the first person east of the Mississippi to have a 7 bypass surgery without a heart-lung machine. Beth Israel was the best hospital. It's like a miracle.
St. Barnabas, we believe in miracles.
For nearly a century, we have measured our success by the businesses, the families, and the futures we've helped to grow. Because financing has always been a growing business at CIT.